Morning again, and good afternoon, good evening, and welcome wherever you are. Those of you in the room today, and also those of you joining us online. My name is Edward Johnson from the Gemfields Group, a responsible miner of colored gemstones, and I'm here today for the second in CIBJO's series of conversations here today at Vicenza Oro. Thank you so much to the Italian exhibition group for hosting us here for this weekend. We've had a wonderful time, I think we can all agree, and seen some fantastic product and innovation here at the show. We've just come from a first conversation this morning about recycled gold, and we wanted to switch our attention now to traceability. And the perspective that we wanted to bring in is to bring different voices from all the disparate parts of the supply chain, the jewelry and gem supply chain. So we have, from my perspective, a representative of the colored gemstones industry. We have a representative from the diamond supply chain with Raluca Anghel from the Natural Diamond Council. Thank you, Raluca, welcome. We also have a representative from the gold supply chain and also chair of CIBJO's Sustainable Development Commission, John Mulligan. Welcome back, John. Thank you for being with us. I'm going to skip one person because I'm going to go to a representative of many different commodities, Martin Leake, who is a special advisor, especially for precious stones, but the DMCC, the Dubai Multi-Commodities Center, does trade many different commodities through it, gold, diamonds, and other materials. And also we have online, I'm hoping, joining from Hong Kong, Wong from, Tai, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, welcome, how are you? Tai is joining us from Tai is joining us from PGI, the Platinum Guild International. And also on stage with us this morning is Francesca from Kering Group, head of innovation for the Kering Group, Francesca Manfredi. Francesca, thank you for joining us in the room.
Thank you, Ed. Good morning, everyone.
So we've got different voices all along the supply chain. And the concept, what we wanted to talk about today, I know many of you followed CIBJO and followed other industry organizations. The topic of traceability has been talked about, I would say, for decades. Some people might be coming to it fresh. Welcome to the conversation. Those who've been doing it for a long time, we'd like to look at it, as I said, from this perspective of all the different players. What are people doing? What are companies doing? And especially if I can start really turning maybe from a CIBJO perspective and then from a retailer perspective with Francesca representing Kering and a large retailing group, about what are the brand expectations, what are consumer expectations and retailer expectations regarding traceability. But maybe if I can first start, John, and turn to you, just to set the frame for the conversation initially. You know, from your background and with your perspective as the chair of the Sustainable Development Commission with CIBJO, what are we seeking to achieve here through and with any work around traceability of product in a supply chain?
Thank you, and thanks again to our hosts and CIBJO for facilitating this. Well, those of you who may have heard me speak an hour ago, and I apologize, my voice will become too familiar. It is all ultimately about transparency and trust. And so the concept of traceability, defining where the provenance or the source of a material or the sources of material that go into products, has become an expectation almost. And it's an expectation because it is needed if you are going to be able to make any credible claim in terms of responsible sourcing. If you're claiming to source something responsibility, you need to be able to identify the source. And I think that's become true not even of just precious metals and gemstones. It's become true of huge numbers of materials and consumer products. Just knowing their provenance, knowing the source, and being able to trust that source. And so at the highest level, that's what we're talking about. Now, in practice, of course, the question is, well, how is that proven or demonstrated? And There are several ways of approaching traceability. There is having a clear chain of custody from source to various parts of the value chain. There is increasingly the concepts, and you heard it in the previous session, increasingly the concepts of how do we then use technologies or define processes to reinforce or make that process of transparency resilient. And sometimes the conversations are about implementation and process. Sometimes they're about the basic relationships and steps across the value chain. I think first of all, and for me, transparency starts with that ability for the various key elements along the value chain to interact, communicate, and agree what they're expected to do. And I'm sure we'll touch upon it, and somewhere down the line, that's going to involve some level of data and demonstrable output.
Great. Yeah, and you know, expectation is clearly important. And you know, if I can turn now to the retailer to bring you into the conversation, of course, that critical last 2 feet of any journey of any jewelry product, none of us exist in the supply chain unless the product is sold to the consumer. So from your perspective, and you're dealing obviously as a retailer with consumers and their expectations, but what is your expectation as a brand? And what are you doing, Kering, to further push traceability on, well, especially diamonds, obviously, but all other products as well, gold, platinum, color gemstones?
So first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ed, for this good question. I would like to start from what the market is expecting and what we are expecting, considering the leading role of Kering in sustainability. And we should look at traceability and what the end consumers are looking for from different perspectives. So there is us, and there are the Gen Z. If we look at the Gen Z, who represents the future consumers, our future customers, we see that many different analyses are telling us that they are really attentive to the extraction, the ethical role of a company, but also how the company is working and acting toward climate change, towards social conditions of the workers. So our expectations are for sure in line with the future trends of the market, which are mostly represented by them. And what are we doing to help our brands in their transition into the applicability of traceability? Basically, we created an internal task force where we supported all our brands in understanding which are the possible digital solutions through innovations in order to trace the diamonds, but also in order to understand how to integrate technology into the supply chain. Still, we do not have the proper and final reply, because we all know in this room that still a lot have to be done. But there are very good innovations and technologies that we are taking in consideration to support the brands, because it is not an easy job, considering also the fragmentation of the supply chain.
Thank you very much for that perspective, and that's great. You know, the task force working with your suppliers. Consumer attitudes and consumer expectations are critical, and Raluca, for you, obviously, the Diamond Producers Association is not a retailer. You represent diamond miners, but you have a very clear insight into the need and the desire of the consumers. You understand their values as well through your work. And I think we've all seen, if we've looked at the industry, this move from the initial mechanisms as a risk mitigation exercise. We've seen this move to a positive impact vehicle. So what do you see as being the values of modern consumers, especially around diamonds? That's your area. And what do they expect from their jewelers and all aspects of the supply chain?
Absolutely, and thank you again for the invitation and for the opportunity to actually tackle such a complex and important topic from so many different sides, because I do believe that the answer is in the power and the joint of all of the parts of the jewelry sector. Now, for the consumer, I have to say, as the Natural Diamond Council, we represent everybody that touches and sells and talks to consumers on diamond jewelry. which means in total we're representing around 10 million livelihoods from the producing countries, all the communities that actually benefit a lot from diamond jewelry, as well as all the various parts, retailers, brands, independent jewelers around. Now, as Natural Diamond Council, we speak to consumers 365 days a year, which means we absolutely listen to their expectations, we see their behaviors, and we want to help support the information that they need. Now, who the consumers are, our target audience are pretty much 35% Gen Z, 65% millennials at the moment. 65% are not married yet, which means their connection to diamonds and diamond jewelry can touch different areas, whether it's self-gifting or whether it's to mark specific great moments in their lives. They are very much fashion-forward consumers, more than ever very interested in who their persona is and looking for elements of jewelry that represent who they are. At the same time, they're also incredibly conscientious and they are sustainability aware. So they will, as Francesca also highlighted, very much looking to align their values with the values of the providers of services, products that they would like to purchase. So that's a very important element for them. Now, to the level of detail in which they would like to get there, we have seen a lot of differences of how they interact with information. They are very much consumers that would like to know that they work with reliable, trustworthy organizations, whether it's their constant jeweler, if you're lucky enough to actually have that, or the retailer from whom they're buying, or the brand from whom they're buying. They want to trust them, which means they do, I would like to say, they do want to get involved in understanding all the initiatives that that brand, that organization is pretty much taking. And their level of interaction is very much through websites, social media. So I would say it's really top level information that they would like to have access to. And then depending on how interested they are in a specific topic, they will delve deeper into it.
That's so important to hear, that the values of current consumers and future consumers of jewelry, brands need to align with their values, what they have.
And I actually wanted to add something else that that just came to my mind with regards to their values. They've also been hit really hard with greenwashing. That means that they've become a little bit blazed. Whenever they hear the term sustainability, the first initiative is, if you portray yourself as a sustainable organization, automatically, in this moment, we can see a reaction of them going, okay, so what exactly is it that you're doing? So our advice as the Natural Diamond Council is always invite your consumers to join you in that journey. It doesn't mean you're there. I don't think anybody's there yet, but you have taken specific steps to actually get there. So share this with consumers versus positioning yourself as bigger, better, having finished all that job. You're just starting.
Fantastic message, join the journey. I think also from my perspective, join the conversation. And there are many conversations going on around the world around technology and also traceability. And Martin, if I turn to you from the DMC perspective, you organized an important forum this year in Dubai on technology and traceability. Unfortunately, not everybody was able to be there. It was very well attended. But what were the key takeaways from that event? And what also can we expect more on from DMC on this subject?
Yeah, thanks, Edward, and thank you, CIBJO, for organising this. In May, we organised a forum on provenance, traceability and technology to look at this issue in the side wings of the Kimberley process. The UAE is the Kimberley process chair for 2024, and we see it as a very important topic, both to strengthen the Kimberley process, but also to ensure that the longevity and the consumer confidence of the industry is maintained. It was designed to shed the spotlight on the importance of provenance and traceability and the transformative role that technology will play in this field in addressing some of the current challenges, but also, just to add on to what Raluca said, to enhance that storytelling, the importance of storytelling. Look, the key takeaways from this forum was the need for a proactive collaboration within the industry, particularly to leverage some of the cutting-edge technologies which are coming up We've all read about AI, blockchain, advanced microprocessing, micromachining, etc. And these have an opportunity to really revolutionize the industry. And I think we need to understand what that technology is out there, and in order to play a role in helping facilitate that technology. As part of that forum that we've created a thought leadership piece, which I'm very pleased to show you here. We have some copies in the front. It will be officially launched tomorrow, so today is the day before that it is actually launched, where some of the key findings of that forum were discussed. Some of the key technologies are also addressed and talked about and advanced. So, as I said, it's going to be coming out online under the Future of Trade website. So I encourage you all to go and look at that. And as I said, we have some copies here in physical process for everybody. So,
thank you, Martin. That's great to hear. And please take advantage of that with Martin at the end of this, for those of you in the room. And for somebody who's not in the room, sadly, Tai, can we turn to you? Welcome and good evening to you from Hong Kong. Sorry that you're not here with us, but it's great that you can join. And from PGI, the Platinum Guild International's perspective, of course, you've been representing the platinum industry for a number of decades, but your sustainability story for this important material, platinum, which not just is important to jewelry, but many other industries and sectors. When it comes to platinum, do you see a growing demand for traceability from the jewelry trade?
Thank you for having me online, and I'm sorry I'm missing out on all the amazing conversation and action in person in Vicenza. Yes, Edward, there is indeed a growing need. PGI's cross-market research found when considering purchasing jewelry, responsibly sourced materials was ranked as one of the top 3 most important factors in sustainability by consumers across China, India, Japan, and the US. The demand in traceability, as we understand it for platinum, and more particularly for consumers and the trade, is mostly concerned with 2 main aspects, and that's the source, the provenance, and also the responsible mining. On the matter of source and provenance, platinum is mainly mined in South Africa or Russia, or small amounts from regions like America. There are markets today that require clear records that the platinum they are importing, it's not coming in from Russia. Currently, most of this is regulated by the government level, where trade sanctions are in place and where COC, Certificate of Conformance, are required in the import and trading of platinum. On the growing demand for ethical and responsible sourcing, on the other hand, the mining and refining operations in South Africa all require proper licensing that follow formal process on ethical mining practices. And most of these companies like Anglo American, Impala, and Northern, they have formal sourcing protocols that are published in their annual reports and environmental reports. And this is further monitored by authorities like the South Africa Diamond and Precious Metal Regulators that enforce licensing on platinum mining and processing.
Thank you, Tai. Platinum's on the journey, platinum's in the conversation, but can we turn back to gold? And before we join, or we ask John to join in, Francesca, turning back from a retailer's perspective and your supply chain, which is obviously extensive for all the products. If we look at gold specifically, where are we at with that, or where are you at Kering? And what should we see happening on gold sourcing to make it responsible?
Well, thank you for this question, which is extremely interesting to discuss the problems that we face every day when it comes to the definition of gold, the definition of recycled gold, how we can integrate the role of ASM into our supply chain. So where are we at today? We are all there around the table looking for next steps, and we hope that very soon an ISO definition will come up, especially around the role of recycled gold, because it's so important for all of us. But there is another important take, which is related to how we measure the impact of gold. Because, you know, we are so many different companies with so many different interests and regulations internally. So the discussion that we are having with other big brands is, would it be possible to have a standardized method and methodology to calculate the impact of gold. And here I would like to be very pleased to listen to John's point of view, considering that this is something that we have already discussed. And my voice is the voice of some operators in the industry, because we struggle to say, hey, okay, this is our impact, but probably it's different from my friend in the other building. But in the end, we are operating with the same raw material, not same operations, not same flow, but same material. So what can we do? This is the discussion we have on the table.
I turn it to you then, John.
Clearly. So this, I think Francesca is basically saying we need a common or at least agreed methodology in terms of life cycle assessment. And I have mixed feelings about LCAs, life cycle assessments, but they are very useful tools. They come typically at the end of the supply chain. So people often do an LCA, life cycle assessment, on their product. What is the footprint or impact of that product? And that's absolutely valid. And there are actually some fairly mature LCAs now looking at gold in particular. And they've been tested or road tested in terms of looking at gold, a mixed origin, looking at primary gold, and looking at ASM gold. I think, again, the question we're going back to is, if you're going to do an LCA or life cycle assessment, and I won't bore you with the technical details, you need good data. You need the measurements which go into the assessment. And that, in some ways, goes back to the previous conversation. If you know the different types of material entering your product, you need data. That needs somebody to be reporting the data. So, as Sakila said in the previous conversation, sorry for those who weren't there, but the LBMA is asking more detailed information in terms of the gold that comes into the refining process. If you have data, and therefore you can provide that data to the end user, you get better assessments. If you don't have good data, your life cycle assessments are frankly weaker. The good thing about life cycle assessments, though, is when you start to gather data, you start to consider the supply chain in total. You start to say, well, what are the different sources? What are the different impacts? And many companies report that process actually allows them to start to consider what data and traceability is for, if they're, like Francesca, considering wider sustainability impacts. You can have a completely traceable system that isn't necessarily contributing to positive sustainability impacts. And so I think you've got to remember, what is your objective? And that's what I said at the start about traceability. Why are you doing it? What are you trying to achieve? If you are trying to basically say, I want to be able to contribute to positive impacts on social and environmental protection, development, and so on, then the question is, you start to ask questions of other players on your supply chain. Somebody mentioned, what do we need to have responsible gold? And several people have talked about responsible mining. From the World Gold Council's perspective, we asked this question of our members, and our members represent well over 60% of all corporate transparent gold production, formalized production, not ASM. And we, with them and stakeholders and communities and governments, produce something called the Responsible Gold Mining Principles. And without, again, going into too much detail, there are 51 principles, independently verified wherever possible. And we explicitly say to consumers and refiners and investors, ask the miners to show you the details. And I think, so you can say what is responsible gold from a mining perspective, because you ask those questions. I think from a product perspective, the question is, you need to ask the questions of the suppliers. Do you have the data? Why don't you have the data? Can we, if you've got the resources, can we assist you in getting better data? But I think whether it be LCA or due diligence or other structured processes, the end game is, frankly, as I say, yes, traceability, but increasingly it is that broader impact.
Positive impact.
Positive impact, knowing, and I think for the jewelry industry, and this is a personal perspective, for the jewelry industry, that is extremely important because you're dependent on discretionary spending. Yeah. And so you need to be able to say, make this choice, because this choice will support your value systems, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here, if I can add an important point, in my opinion, is the role of collaboration among the different partners. And because, of course, I can ask my supplier, but my supplier are shared with all the other giant groups. So why don't we work all together on a standardized something that fulfill all the different topics? And the good way to do it, in my opinion, could be through the Watch and Jewellery initiative, because that is the platform that unified all of us, but also through CIBJO, which is the organization that represents the interest of the industry. So we are all in an ecosystem, and here comes the need of a unified something that we should define and create together, in my opinion.
Thank you. Collaboration, absolutely critical. And if I would be remiss if I wasn't bringing coloured stones into this conversation. And I'd like to highlight from a Gemfields perspective the importance of collaborating with Kering, Richemont, LVMH, and other brands in the Coloured Gemstone Working Group, which has been operating since 2015 to improve the coloured gemstone supply chain. And one of the critical task forces in that is around traceability. All right, and we might say there's considerable work being done on diamonds. We're discussing that. There's considerable work being done on gold, but let's not forget about the colored stones. All right, a significant player, and the collaboration is bringing improvements in that. So apologies for going off script a little bit there, but I need to bring in the colored stone perspective. Turning to platinum, Ty, for you, we talked about the work that you've been doing and the demand that there is for traceability, but what actions do you see being taken by the jewelry trade with questions to you and your members as platinum miners when it comes around to transparency and traceability of platinum?
Yes, there are projects in the pipeline. Some are initiated by PGI, but most are collaborative efforts with our trade partners, also with organizations such as WJI and also with CIBJO. Really, I think the goal right now is to close the information gap between regulatory practices on the international level and consumer communications. So just going back to the matter of provenance, there are development of platforms right now that will certify the platinum sourced from South Africa for jewelry manufacturing. So this potentially takes the form of digital product passports introduced already in the EU to enable consumers to search and compare sustainability practices. And this is already, I guess, a trend for high environmental impact products like textiles, batteries, electronics. Though this is not mandatory and jewelry is not yet a named priority, we are exploring with partners, with different organizations and platforms in the prototype development of digital product passports for South Africa sourced platinum. As we can anticipate, this will be an important aspect for jewelry consumers in the near future. And then on the matter of ethical mining, PGI launched an information portal last year on responsible platinum to help the jewelry trade and consumers to learn a little bit more about how platinum is responsibly sourced, abiding by industry-leading guidelines concerning environmental standards, social impact, and governance practices. And just echoing what John is saying, I think all these are projects and initiatives, means of traceability to really get to the ends of what we're trying to prove. It's what we're trying to tell and what we're trying to showcase, the positive impact that that we're bringing into the industry and into the trade. Yeah.
Thank you. So platinum's perspective, we've talked about gold. I've been able to bring in a colored stone perspective, and turning to diamonds, of course, Raluca, how can traceability be integrated into what would be seen by the consumer as a future-proof supply chain for the jewelry industry, with examples that you know are existing already in solutions and standards and mechanisms?
Consumers aren't aware of supply chains, and consumers, again, they really just want to focus on the element of trusting. They want to go back to those organizations that represent a strength and represent a lot of effort. It's up to us as a jewelry industry, as a joint jewelry industry. I'm so aligned with John on looking at the impact that we bring and taking care of those supply chains and absolutely future-proof supply chains. What we meant by that when we were discussing about this topic was very much we need to integrate traceability into these supply chains. It's all about understanding and creating value and creating the responsibility of your entire supply/value chain. We're all each other's stakeholders, whether you're in the beginning of the supply chain or at the end, just as you're bringing the product to the sector. Legislation is following very closely. In the EU, there are several pieces of legislation that were passed this year and at the end of last year, including corporate sustainability on due diligence, corporate sustainability reporting directive done by the European Union. And whilst not everybody here in the room is directly affected by it, you do have the home for a lot of organizations that are based in the European Union, and I can definitely tell you this will have a spillover effect within the entire I would say whether it's global legislation or protocols that you will need to do in between organizations. And that means looking at each and every level of your supply chain, the responsibility you're bringing, the environmental stewardship, the social responsibility is paramount. We often end up talking about the environmental perspectives, but environment is just one of the 3 pillars of sustainability. You need to look how is it that you're driving the profit generation, and the social responsibility, that has a very strong spillover effect. So future-proof means you know the provenance of your products, you work with all of the organizations, you choose your suppliers according to the high standards that they're keeping. It's one of the, I would say, most important elements of choice and strength that you pretty much have. In the world of diamonds, I think this work has been done in 20 plus years, if not. The system is a little bit different because diamonds are delivered, I think it's more than 90% by large companies, which means most of them are public listed companies. They have regulations that they need to abide by. They have very, very stringent criteria with regards to their verification, assurance of all of the sustainability-related activity, obligation to report, but it's also that they act as corporate citizens. So this is a very interesting particularity of the market because it's easier to monitor, control, and trust. And for me, the assurance, the verification of all of the information that is available is vital in what you're putting out there. Technology also for diamonds in terms of technology behind traceability is one of the key elements for building this strong supply chain. You have a lot of solutions that are growing a lot. We have Everledger here in the room, of course, Tracer, iTraceIt are amongst the key tools and the key platforms that have been provided. There are, at least I know for the Tracer platform, they have millions of carats of rough diamonds already on the platform, hundreds of thousands of polished. They've announced the integration with the GIA in terms of adding other elements, not just the initial provenance or the source for the rough diamonds and afterwards the polished diamonds, but actually looking into elements of the grading of the diamond, which adds to the whole mapping of what that diamond that you have pretty much is. And then for me, one of the most beautiful assets are certainly the impact-related information. If you connect all of these, the storytelling that you can bring your consumers, doubled by real action, is incredibly strong. And I can definitely tell you, if you have this conversation with your consumers, they will need to feel good about their purchases, and you are helping them understand that through the choices they make, they have huge power over the positive impact that they can create. It's indirect impact, but it's equally important and vital.
And that's a driver for people, and I'm pleased that you introduced, unfortunately, yet another acronym into the alphabet soup of acronyms that we have to deal with in the industry, but the CSDDD, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and others are a significant game changer this year through the EU, and potential other regulations that will be coming that will require all areas of the supply chain to be much more diligent and follow much more enhanced due diligence. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and you have all these pieces of legislation, of course, primarily target the large organizations, but the large organizations need to report on all of these elements through their entire supply chain, which means all of the suppliers within that value chain will be part of the whole conversation and reporting and responsible action.
So we see the issue, we see the need, but of course, critically with diamonds, Martin, do you feel we're equipped enough? Do we have enough solutions to be able to identify source of every single diamond in the supply chain?
Yeah, thanks, Edward. I mean, the industry's grappling with a lot of unique challenges at the moment. We've got changing consumer behaviors. There's obviously lower demand in China. We've got the rise of lab-grown diamonds. We've got import restrictions, etc. And there's all these traceability solutions which are coming up and all these threats of new regulations. And the industry really needs to get together, collaborate, work together, but actually make it easier for people involved in the supply chain to operate that. So the industry needs to start to own a standard about what is required and how can that be built into that storytelling that we talk so much about. And that was one of the outcomes that we came up with from that Provenance, Traceability and Technology Forum. Technology is there. There are many technologies. There's a plethora of nano engraving to blockchain to manufacturing solutions which are out there to help the industry, but we really need to come together under one roof and move that forward. Securing comprehensive traceability and proof of origin for every single diamond coming out of a mine is obviously the ideal. Yeah, that's the end goal that we all should be ultimately aiming for. But when we build these things, and anyone who knows me well in the last 20 years, I always say, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. Okay? It's a journey. It's a journey of continuous improvement. And there are, as I said, a number of solutions. We have to be a bit agnostic to those solutions. Let the market decide which is going to be the one which is riding. Don't let regulation come in and force us to do something which doesn't fit. The market will decide how that is best to do that. And we need to work out how we can scale up these opportunities and make it easier for the supply chain to use it as part of their business. As I said, you know, we've looked at this issue and we've come up with some ideas, some recommendations about what we need to do about being. We want to remain technology agnostic. We want the market to determine what technology is actually going to end up using it. But we need to come up with credible solutions so that we can control that rather than let somebody else control it for us. So those are the key messages that really we want to try and advance.
Can I hold with you for a second there, Martin, and ask, you know, you talked about challenges in traceability of the diamond, and I hear you fundamentally, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, journey of improvement. But can you give me some examples from a Dubai perspective? And considerable and increasing amounts of diamonds are traveling through Dubai. So what are some of the specific examples of challenges that the industry there faces?
Sorry, the industry faces in Dubai?
Yes, product traveling through Dubai.
Look, I mean, we are trying to stay agnostic in some of the geopolitical issues. However, we want to enable our members to be able to do business all over the world. So they need to understand the restrictions in Europe or in the G7 countries, whilst also so separation and segregation are absolutely key. And that traceability is a real enabler for business because it enables you to link your value proposition, understand your value proposition better, so that you can be better at telling the story around that. Linking it to finance, linking it to payments is very important. So I bring it back to the business. It's all very well coming up and talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, but we need to make it practical and we need to make it enable business to happen rather than be a barrier for business to happen. There's a lot of confusion going on around some of the regulations which are being passed at the moment, and it is daunting, and I'm in this profession and I find it daunting and intimidating sometimes that new acronyms come up every week. We need to try and work out a way of translating that into that storytelling that we need to develop. And linking the supply chain, introducing the suppliers 1 level, 2 level, 3 levels back throughout the chain is important in telling a very positive story about the good that diamonds, gold, and other commodities do in business. So rather than try to restrict business, we want to enable business to be able to be at the forefront of this.
Great, thank you. And storytelling, I'd like to stick on that for a little bit, Francesca. And I think we touched briefly on ASM, artisanal and small-scale mining, which has a considerable amount of material through the colored gemstone supply chain, our one from Gemfields' perspective, also through gold, less so in diamonds, but it still significantly touches people's lives. So from Kering's perspective with working with ASM, and much storytelling has been done on ASM, some positive, sadly, realistically, some negative. What does traceability mean and why does it matter for ASM around the world?
Thank you for the good question. First of all, I would like to say that Kering is decided to work and to support ASM, gold ASM mine, because of the social role of ASM gold mines. And it is clearly written in our standards that we use recycled gold, but also gold from ASM. And why traceability is so important for ASM? Because unfortunately, due to all the let's say, shadows lines linked to illegal mining, the ASM have to rely on their credibility, and their credibility is very often, not in a good position due to what the others are doing. But there are some very good examples, and I'm glad that before in the previous panel, Ital Preziosi was mentioning that. And in our opinion, the role of traceability is key, because if thanks to innovation, we are able to support the role of ASM, we could really let them improve their position and also their position in the industry, because the quantity of recycled gold is not infinite, and the role of ASM are also there fulfilling that space. So why it's important to support the ASM and to support them through technology? Because through technology we can support them in their positioning into the safe space in the industry. And so the innovation has a key role in supporting big groups who are working to create synergies with them and with the other industries.
Do you have any examples of specific mechanisms that are working that you approve of and like to work with for ASM sourcing?
Yeah, first of all, for sure, due diligence, it's key. So we have a huge due diligence to put in process. And what is even more important is the role of the refiner with whom we work. Because through the refiner, which has an extremely important role, we can dig into the supply chain. The ASM has a specific role. And even if it is not that common, but there are some important ASM which have already committed to net zero, which seems quite impossible, but they committed. So we are working with them first in understanding if it is true, reachable, and how we can support the transition.
I was going to say, for ASM, I think the story for consumers, or as it landed to consumers, is so misunderstood, and it's very much a story of empowerment. And I'm really so happy that you brought it on, because through this, it's another way in which you can continue helping and increasing the positive impact that you have, and that's a full-blown direct societal impact. You're absolutely increasing the livelihoods of those local communities that very much depend on that, and their growth and long-term sort of well-being. In the diamond world, we have a lot of examples there as well, and one of them is certainly Gemfair, because you mentioned the connection between creating standards, improving how they also end up recovering diamonds in this way, right? So increasing that part of responsibility and environmental standards that's integrated within Gemfair as a program, but also the provision of the platform, digital platform, that helps actually get directly from ASM to the market. You help them through a very transparent and quite a quick way, let's say, for them to have access to fair prices for the products that they want to put on that market, education for them, because of course a lot of them do not have the right experiences, and you want to bring that to them and help grow that. So certainly it's a story of empowerment, and I do believe that through technology you can help streamline that offering and the increase of the so much needed standards. So developing those alongside access to market is crucial.
Thank you. And I think we've painted a really important picture of the benefits that ASM brings to supply chains. But I wanted to bring it back a little bit, John, if I could, to, in part the earlier conversation about recycled gold as an option for people. And of course, gold is indestructible, it's endlessly malleable, it is circular by definition. Nobody ever knowingly throws away any gold. So what does that aspect of gold mean for traceability solutions?
Thanks. So it means that you don't have a source and an end destination, and that destination is permanent. It means that gold eventually over time will come back onto the market. And the question is, this is what you mean. What do you mean by traceability and what it's for? If you want to be able to guarantee the responsible provenance of the material, then you're never going to get every ounce being trackable, because by definition, over time, the gold will be melted, reformed, used for different purposes, investment, jewelry, etc. What you do want is a chain of custody system, a process by which every part of the supply chain can rely on and trust the responsibility. And you need the data, which is by definition traceable data, to support that. So it's a different concept than some people's idea of traceability, which is I buy something, I get a certificate with it, I use it, job done. That's not going to be the case with gold. What can be the case, and is the case for a large part of the gold market already, I think very much underestimated, is newly mined gold is, in the formal space, demonstrably should be, and you should ask for this, demonstrably proven to be responsibly sourced. It goes to a responsible accredited refiner. It then knows its customer and sells it and passes on that level of detail and data to allow further responsibility to prosper, and also to allow people to start building on that data for sustainability impacts. And that's, I think, what it means to go. I just want to go back briefly on the ASM issue, because the question is, what you're talking about is responsible ASM. And you know exactly what you're asking, and you know the questions you're asking. In gold, the big challenges for the recycled aspect is people are not really talking about recycling at all. They're talking about the informal/illicit flows. And a lot of those, unfortunately, are ASM sourced, the vast majority. That, however, is not to point the finger at the ASM source. You are now looking at things that are well beyond your market. You're looking at extreme poverty, lack of rule of law, lack of government support, lack of alternative livelihoods. So being aware of all of those, the question then becomes with ASM, and frankly with all supply chain participants, how can you contribute to further responsible behavior? And I think we're all committed to that, I'd like to think. With regards to traceability, however, when you have an opaque section of the market that you can't trace, you are obliged to actually segment it. And it may go somewhere else, but if it doesn't go into the responsible supply chain, that your business is to maintain that responsible supply chain. And that's basically how I see traceability within the gold market. It's also how I see this issue of how do we encourage better standards and expand responsible tracing.
And that responsible sourcing and that traceability enables the storytelling of the positive impact, and that's the critical piece.
Can I ask you a quick question, if you don't mind?
Of course.
Well, I'm just thinking, you mentioned that you're representing coloured gemstones, and a large part of the coloured gemstone market is ASM. And in some ways, without putting words in your mouth, but in some ways you're operating from a slightly different perspective, because you are a formalized, industrialized miner. Do you just want to comment? Shall I ask you? I'm asking you to comment on, what does the traceability therefore mean to you? How do you demonstrate it? What does it mean to your supply chain?
Thank you for the question.
Sorry to put it.
We all know, and we're representing different market segments, and there's been a lot of work done on gold, diamond, platinum is entering the conversation, and for years people have said it is either impossible/difficult for colored stones. Certainly our perspective of Gemfields as a reasonably significant supplier of product into the market, we know all of our material, all of our rubies from Mozambique, all of our emeralds from Zambia are fully traceable through us, and then they're entering into the supply chain with those traceability mechanisms. So we use a blockchain, and we use a Gubelin paternity testing system for a percentage of our high-value product. We pass that information on to customers who then choose whether they use it. And we would encourage people to use that more because there is consumer demand for it, as we've talked about. Of course, our percentage of product is smaller than what comes through artisanal and small-scale mining communities, and we fully support those communities, except, however, what we often see as being purported as ASM is actually illegally obtained material, which comes under a banner of being, hopefully, providing a positive impact through being labeled as ASM. So I think it comes back to, from our perspective, due diligence, enhanced due diligence, asking the questions and seeing the proof. If somebody says, this is where this comes from, or it is traceable, asking the difficult questions of suppliers to seek proof.
Thanks.
I hope that helps.
Yes, sorry to put you on the spot, but yeah.
No, not at all. We're getting towards the end of the hour here, and I do want to encourage those of you in the room, if you have any questions, we'll find some time on it when we finish up here. Positive impact. I'd like to finish with a couple of questions around that, especially Ty, we haven't forgotten you. Thank you very much for being there. How do you communicate the positive impact that platinum makes in the areas and the communities where your members mine?
Yeah, so one of the steps that we've taken earlier this year is actually responsibly mined platinum is now in the market. It was first available in early 2024 this year, and it was presented to the jewelry trade in Las Vegas at the JCK in June. So responsibly mined platinum is sourced directly from South Africa and meets the highest ethical and sustainability standards. And it is supplied in compliance with the LPPM Responsible Platinum Guidelines. So at the moment, responsibly mined platinum is from Anglo-American and in the form of casting grain. And it is now supplied by Stoller in the US. And since its launch, we witnessed an increasing demand for it. And not just in the USA, but also globally. So what we're looking at, this is just the start. So we are looking at scaling up of the availability and distribution. This will be a continuous endeavor in the near future. And when this is combined with solutions like digital product passports to enable transparency and a wider range of information, this will undoubtedly enhance the consumer experience. So the consumers can be better informed when they're making choices for their jewelry purchases.
Thank you. I'd like to finish, if I can, with just a little bit of a plug, Martin, for the upcoming Dubai Diamond Conference, which I believe is kicking off in November. Maybe, you know, where a lot of discussions will be taking place with yourselves about the positive impact that diamonds are making. So why should people be in Dubai for Dubai Diamond Week in November? And give us some information, the benefits of being in that conversation.
Yeah, sure. So we've got the Dubai Diamond Week coming up, kick-started by the Dubai Diamond Conference on the 11th of November. The theme of that conference is thriving under pressure and navigating the new global paradigms. Dubai really is a place where East meets West and is the center where business happens and where the conversations happen. And there's some important conversations that the industry needs to have, given the current geopolitical issues, but also given the struggles that the industry is having with the market. And we need to get there to tell a positive story. It's the start of a week where we've also got the KP Plenary happening, so we've got all the producer countries coming to Dubai to participate in the Kimberley process, which plays a vital role in the diamond supply chain. Yes, it's not perfect, but we want to strengthen it, and we are working to strengthen it this year as part of our year of delivery, where we are looking at setting up a permanent secretariat to maintain it. We're looking at the review and reform cycle to strengthen it, and we're looking at digitization and technology to try and enhance some of the traceability solutions that we're talking about. We've also got, I'm very pleased to be here in Vicenza, we've got the JGT show happening, the Jewels German Technology, which is a joint venture between the Italian exhibition group and the Informa Markets in Hong Kong, where we are having a B2B trade show, so where there's going to be a lot of a trade happening as well. Dubai is a great location for connectivity, and if you've never been to Dubai, I'd urge you to come and see what's there, to actually realize that the amount of business which is going on there and the responsibility that is coming with that business is really thriving, and Dubai is thriving. So we'd like to welcome you all there to that Dubai Diamond Week as we tackle some of these issues head on. And we look at parallels as well with the other industries which have faced similar challenges to the jewelry industry now facing. And some of them have thrived, some of them didn't do so well. And these are important discussions that we need to have at an industry level to see how we can best move forward. So thanks for the opportunity for the plug. We look forward to seeing you all in Dubai, the week of the 11th of November. It's straight after the CIBJO conference in China, so we look forward to seeing you all there afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you. You know, there's a lot more that the panelists here in the room and online can discuss, but I think it's important, instead of the questions we've addressed, but we hear from you if you have any questions or issues you'd like to address. I can see a couple of hands up. If I can go first to, I think it's Leanne. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
My name's Leanne Kemp. I'm the founder of Everledger, a traceability company. My question isn't about the technology, it's about the economics of traceability. And I think everyone on the panel here, there's a definite fine balance between enabling value and capturing value when it comes to traceability. We've seen that there's costs associated with it. What is an acceptable threshold, and how do you think about it? Is it a percentage of product? Is it seen as a service? Ultimately, everyone has said the consumer pays, but if we don't embed it in our everyday practice, should it then be considered a pre-competitive landscape where we're all contributing for the better good?
I'm sure we can all answer this question. Can I quickly take it from a coloured stone perspective? You know, the traceability solutions that we offer for the rubies and the emeralds that we mine in the countries of Mozambique and Zambia obviously have a cost implication. But we consider that part of a cost of doing business, all right? Obviously, if those become prohibitive, we have to consider them. But for us, it's a given. Gemfields started trying to bring more traceability and transparency to an industry that's otherwise seen as being opaque. We've talked about that. So we consider it a cost of doing business simply. And it's what we have to do to change the Colorstone supply chain and the image of the Colorstone supply chain. I'll turn it over to others.
From my perspective, a point that is still there, letting the brands wait for what to do, is the regulations. One day is one date, then in 1 week could be another date with different implications. So this is what could prevent the companies to take a real decision, because what is good today could be needed to be amended in 1 month, 2 months, and imagine when you are a big brand, a big group, it's not easy to change things easily. So what is really important to receive a key regulation on what has to be done and by when. That is very important when you are a big group.
Thank you. Any other perspectives?
I'd just like to say I think it's a really good question. It's one that, as Leanne knows, that the whole due diligence stakeholder groups have been wrestling with for some time, and not purely with gold, but anybody who's attended the OECD multi-stakeholder group on responsible sourcing of minerals, sorry, it's a long name, knows we've been debating this, who pays for due diligence? And I think, fortunately, we have players within the jewelry space where the end player has often taken a lot of, had the resource and you know, kind of driven some of that. But in terms of whole global markets, who pays for the due diligence, and when is the value issue pivotal, I think, is absolutely critical. I can only speak for the World Gold Council in the sense that we, trying to advance some of those things, we say as a collective body, we will try and advance them within the resources we've got. And we're not there to make a profit out of that at all. We're there to try and advance it. Somewhere down the line, however, you need the key pivotal points along the supply chain to decide when it is of value to them. And globally, that is a challenge because these issues are not necessarily seen as so pivotal in other markets. So how do you try and advance that? I would say, and I'll finish on this, I would say that within the gold sector over the last 5 years, the degree to which we are now talking about these things from mine to market, the reason why we're regularly in the same room with Watch and Jewellery Initiatives, with CIBJO, with the LBMA, with China Gold Association, with the DMCC, who are members of our Gold Principles group. The reason we are is to try and start to advance these things, to try and say, can we agree? But it's a really good question. Who pays and where is the value point in terms of value creation, or who absorbs the value pain?
Yeah, Leanne, that's a question I've also personally often asked. How are you using this information, creating that common standard also of understanding the information that you want to collect? Do we all understand the same things through source, through provenance? Without that, it's we are talking just in principle. So definitely, I think there needs to be a joint approach to that.
Conscious of time, did see another hand up there at the back in the auditorium. If we have the mic.
I wish we had a spotlight so we can use it.
Yeah, but I can see a lady with a hand up at the back there. Thank you so much for being so prominent with your hand. Conscious of time, ladies and gentlemen, but please, welcome.
Hi, my name is Joy. I'm the owner of a responsible jewelry company. And I wanted to ask about the loopholes because things are happening, regulations are great, and I'm happy that things are improving, but there are still major loopholes. So I would like to ask each one of you, which ones do you think are the biggest that are not yet resolved?
What are the loopholes in the different supply chains that we all represent that are creating negative impact? Is that the question?
Yeah, what are the loopholes that still exist, that still need to be solved? And the issues that are not being solved by the regulations that are being passed now, and the due diligence that single companies have decided to
I can take one that for me is quite important, both as a communicator. So for Natural Diamond Council, of course, we are very much focused on the communication and the marketing side of things. We do see that there are a lot of pieces of information that are put out there with regards to impact and with regards to processes that are not verified. I think that's extremely important. Using proper standards, you have the likes of the Responsible Jewelry Council that provide, you have a certain code of practices that gets assured. That sort of third-party verification assurance, I find absolutely instrumental, because otherwise I feel we're just communicating more on feelings, impressions, our own assessment, but I would personally need that extra step of verification of information.
Can I answer that?
Maybe I'll take a perspective to answer your question, and then others can take from a coloured stone perspective. I think the industry has been on a journey of talking about country of origin for coloured stones for some time, and that is a loophole. From our perspective at Gemfields, buyers should be asking about mine or company of origin. There is a significant difference in the positive impact and negative impact created by a colored gemstone, a ruby in our case, that's mined through our mechanisms and our company in Mozambique, and those that are created by the illegal mining operations that operate around us. So if you're just asking for country, you're potentially at risk of creating negative impact. You need to boil it down to mine or producer.
Yeah, and you can also audit and verify that, because everybody has their own responsibility to act in a specific way. That's why you choose with whom you work. You look at their responsibility and impact. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I've got one comment which I think partially, hopefully answers your question, and that is a lot of the loopholes, and I'm going to talk about supply chains in total, a lot of the loopholes are exacerbated or created because you don't bring governments to the table. So you talk about what the regulations are. Well, in lots of the world, there aren't regulations in place. There's a lot of unregulated markets. And when you seek to improve traceability, responsibility, if the government isn't supportive or not involved or chooses not to come to the table, then it is very likely those loopholes will remain. And I think bringing, when we're talking about the big supply chain issues, trying to encourage responsible supply chains from mine to market, I think you can find responsible actors, but unless you have the governments there to support you, it becomes quite problematic. And that we find that in our attempts to help formalize ASM, the real challenge is incentivizing governments to talk to you.
Thank you. Joy, I get the feeling that you'd like to continue the conversation, and I see the gentleman there very, very diligently, excuse the pun, holding your hand up, but we must draw it to a close there. Please feel free to talk with any of us in the break, but the break can only now be 7 minutes because we do have another discussion coming up at 1:30 the hour. I said at the beginning of this conversation that this discussion today was about traceability, which has been talked about for a long time already in the industry. It will continue this conversation, but thank you for your active participation. Everybody here in the room with me, Ty, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you soon. All the best to you and all our friends in Hong Kong. Thank you for being here. We'll have another conversation starting up in, well, now 6 minutes and counting. Have a nice
5.
5. Thank you.
I'll stay here.